Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are going to get started here in just about a minute or so to let some more people join in. Again, thank you, and we'll be starting here in just a minute. Hello, all, and welcome to this MZ webinar. My name is Josh Wright, and I'm the head of MZ Community Insights team. And today I'm joined by Dustin Lester, our Director for Strategic Partnerships and Economic Development. We hope you are staying healthy and well out there. We really appreciate so many of you joining us during this uncertain time. There's no good analog for what we're all experiencing right now. Community leaders, you all are on the front lines serving your businesses and job seekers. And from what we've seen and what we see on LinkedIn and out there, and just talking to all of our clients, the response has been nothing short of remarkable. We're seeing it across the US and Canada and really the world, the global response to the coronavirus. We've gotten many questions on the types of data to use right now, and so we put some suggestions and workflows together. Our hope in this webinar is that it gives you some timely and valuable info that you can take back to your partners, your decision makers, and funders. Before we get to that, just a quick word about MZ and also a quick housekeeping note. Throughout this whole webinar, you can input questions in the question box. Your lines have been muted, but we will get to those questions at the end. We will have a Q&A. Also, a quick word on MZ for those of you who are unfamiliar. Our mission is to use labor market data to inform and connect people, education, and employers. We hyper-focus on supplying labor market analytics to help EDOs and workforce organizations make good decisions and use their resources wisely so their communities can prosper. Here's our agenda for today. I'm going to set the stage quickly, talk through a little bit of why we're here. We're going to cover a number of different types of data and indicators to be looking at right now, including some real-time information, helping repurpose impacted workers, talk a little bit about economic impact and supply chain analysis, other data to consider, and then preparing for what comes next as well. First, I want to tell the story here in a few charts. This is all to many of you going to be well known, so we're not going to belabor this. But last Friday, the New York Times had this on their cover of their newspaper. Really stunning chart showing the rise in initial unemployment insurance claims. 3.3 million last Thursday. The new report came out this morning, as many of you have probably seen. And I saw this enterprising soul on Twitter put this, redesigned this New York Times cover to show what it would look like if they tried to do this again. So just a remarkable total this morning, 6.6 million initial unemployment claims. It does not include the self-employed that are going to be joining that the CARES Act allows them to start filing for, and that we'll start seeing that next week. So 10 million between the last 2 weeks, and a lot of folks who are struggling to even be able to file claims. So this is just an unprecedented time, staggering numbers, obviously, and very profound and sobering in many ways, because these layoffs, these unemployment claims represent each individual families that are impacted, small business owners, people who have to lay off, restaurant owners, hospitality companies who have to lay off workers because of what's going on right now. It's obviously a big help. First and foremost, a public health crisis through this COVID-19, but the economic impact and fallout has been nothing short of staggering. And those numbers certainly tell part of the story, not the whole story. And it's just really unfolding in many ways. So I like what Jay Garner, site selection consultant and CEO of Garner Economics, put on LinkedIn and on his blog, talking about really right now, and he coined this. Our friends at DCI coined the term the Great Pause. We went from a great recession through a huge period of growth and recovery to now the Great Pause. And what we think, and I firmly agree with Jay here, is that it's going to become the Great Pivot. There's going to be a lot. This is an opportunity where there's going to be a lot of acceleration of certain trends and a lot happening in the labor market and the economy. We'll get to that a little bit about at the end. Okay, so just setting the stage there quickly, we want to get into the meat of our webinar today, and that is, what data can you use to understand and respond to all this? We're going to first cover some real-time indicators, and then Dustin's going to get into some other things to look at. So we've gotten a lot of questions the last few weeks from the hundreds of communities that we serve, the different folks reaching out to us and saying, what are those indicators, what are those metrics that you guys would recommend looking at? And one of the immediate things that we've noticed, we've held some COVID-19 Zoom roundtables. We're going to be hosting some more. I've got information on that here in a little bit as well. And one of the big things that came out of those roundtables last week that we hosted was one of the immediate responses is many communities are mobilizing surveys of their businesses to understand and assess that impact of the estimated impact on revenue, on headcount, on what's happening right now, and how they can help, and which businesses they can help, and which businesses you all can help. So business surveys really, if they're structured the right way, and depending on the feedback you're getting, can serve as a quasi real-time metric of how to mobilize your efforts. But there's a litany of other things. We're not going to cover all of these in detail. Obviously, we looked at initial unemployment claims already, warn notices from companies who are closing and have to give that notice. Google Trends, we've seen a few different things about that. Google Trend, even people trending out what's happening on Amazon with purchases. Google, lots of real-time indicators you can get from Google. Obviously, imperfect data there, but interesting nonetheless. Unemployment by industry, that data will start to roll in really pretty clearly here in the next weeks and month, and you'll start to see that. JOLTS, the hires, quits, openings, that is not super regionalized data, but still going to be eye-opening as we keep going through this. And then job posting analytics. And this is what we want to focus on here for the real-time section, just because this is in our wheelhouse at MZ. We've been supplying job posting analytics for years now and complementing it with our other traditional labor market sources. And so we want to first highlight that, as some of you have probably seen, MZ just the other day released a public job posting dashboard, totally open and free to the public. A really cool breakdown by industry, by state, by occupation, by company of the trends that we see day over day, week over week, and month over month. So highly recommend that. You can go to our COVID-19 resource page, and there's a link to that dashboard. Just a few trends from that dashboard before we dive into some more regional analysis. There are obviously many negatives happening. We're seeing a huge slowdown in job postings, as with many other data right now. But you can start to see here, this is what the dashboard looks like here on the left, and you can start to see some of the industries that are actually through this time increasing their posting activity. This doesn't necessarily mean that they will see that subsequent exact number of hires, but you can see that they are bumping up the number of postings that they are putting online. So this includes non-store retailers, construction of buildings, transportation, sport activities for transportation, different home and garden dealers and stores, some personal laundry services. Some of these are essential services. Some of these are obviously seeing a surge in demand, and so they are hiring. On the occupation side, here's a list of the different ones that just popped out to us. This includes everything from writers and authors to assemblers and fabricators, some production workers here, as you can see, protective services, and obviously healthcare. Registered nurses are on the front lines among the group that are really the true heroes of all this right now. And there has been a bit of an uptick in month over month in registered nursing postings as well. In terms of companies posting, this is one headline that caught our attention. That obviously more people are at home, locked down, and their house is quarantined, and so demand for online services, gaming, other things like that has gone up. Nintendo Switch is sold out everywhere, as you can see here, and you can see companies that are hiring. Nintendo is up, Amazon Fulfillment is way up, Costco as well, FedEx, Electronic Arts, the video game company, is up as well. Again, these are all active postings, the percent change month over month. So why, just to take a step back here, we just showed some cool trends from this public free job posting dashboard that we released this week, and hope that it's a great resource for your communities. But why track job posting activity? It really does serve as a proxy for local labor market activity in real time, or as close to real time as can be had. And we'll get into that here in a second. You can break down regional versus state versus national trends, see who's hiring or who at least is ramping up the posting in terms of which companies are slowing down posting. You can get breakdowns by occupation and job title, skills, and skills have become a big theme for us even in the last couple of years, and I think it's going to become even more of a skills-based labor market moving forward. And one great suggestion that came out of the roundtables that we had was the desire to look at what skills are resilient in the regions that you live in, and being able to track that pre-COVID and post-COVID to see what are those skills that even through a big crisis like this really stand the test of time, and then going to your training providers and saying we should make sure that we're emphasizing these skills in our curriculum, in your courses. And then obviously remote work is becoming a bigger trend, has been for a number of years, and we think it's going to become even bigger through this. So there are some great job posting analytics allow you to look at that remote work component as well. So let's dive into this really quickly here. I picked Orlando as an example here. Again, so the job posting dashboard we have online allows you to go into Florida, every other state, but our job postings and our tools, many of you have access to, allow you to break it down by metro, metropolitan area, and county as well. So in Orlando as being one of those real epicenters of tourism and hospitality, extremely hard hit right now. But there is growth, and there's growth in certain companies that are seeing huge growth. This is percent change for companies comparing the most recent 30 days as of March 30th to the previous 30 days. And a number of these are staffing agencies. A couple of them are staffing agencies, a couple are trucking firms, or third parties who help hire. Instacart obviously has seen a big demand as well. And then we can start to break down, okay, which ones are, where these occupations are increasing in Orlando, not just the companies, but what kind of occupations are we seeing actually take a jump up? Here on the right, on the far right-hand side of this table, you can start to see these are the last 30 days active postings, and then the latest 30 days by percent change. You can also see here we have the latest day active postings, the latest 7 days as well. And for us, latest day, there's usually about a 1 to 2 day lag until we can get that latest day. So it's not absolutely real time, as in totally live right when it happens. But we are processing hundreds of millions of postings as close to real time as possible, so that we can surface those insights to you all, and we can start to see here some really interesting trends. Everything from, again, writers and editors up to recreational therapists, some construction workers and cement masons and concrete finishers, oil and gas service unit operators there in Orlando, and interpreters and translators as well. What about skills? So we can do the same thing for skills. You can start to see here in the job posting table that we have in our tools where you can break down skills, company, occupation, and job title. You start to see, okay, interesting language translation, insurance sales, some assisted living stuff popping up here in terms of the last 30 days as well. So you start to see the skills that are increasingly in demand or increasingly being listed in job postings that are going online. We can also see remote work trends. We have a way to look at basically tease out, filter which postings list jobs as being remote or not being remote. It's not a perfect measure in the sense that some jobs might, some companies might list a job, not say that it's, not actually say explicitly that it's remote and still allow for a remote worker to take that job. But for the postings that do, we can start to see here some trends here. So these are active postings over the last few years, and you can start to see the longer term trend of jobs that list being remote. We just yesterday released a couple great articles on reports around remote work. I recommend checking our blog, our MZ blog for that. One of those blog posts is called Future of Remote Work, and digs into a ton of this. Also digs into some remote worker data you can get from the American Community Survey that we also surface to our subscribers as well. The other thing you can do in job postings is start to look for emerging terms, keywords, keyword search. I did one just for COVID-19, did not include coronavirus, so the numbers would be a bit higher if we included coronavirus as well. But these are job postings that mention COVID-19. So lots of them, could be healthcare workers, they could be ancillary industries. But you can start to see here, obviously, just from March 15th to March 30th, just this tremendous rise in job postings that are active and live right now that mention COVID-19. And we can break that out by metro. I just listed here from the last 7 days, the ranked the last 7 days, the metros that have had the most job postings that mention COVID-19. So that's just a few ways that we encourage you to be looking at job posting analytics, to be surfacing these insights. We see a lot of communities putting up job boards, either temporary COVID-19 job boards or just listing companies who are hiring right now. This is a great way to do that, no matter what job posting source you're looking at right now. With that, we're going to switch to really how to think about repositioning, repurposing impacted workers. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dustin.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you to everybody on the call today. We really appreciate your time. So some interesting things that we're seeing from the private sector, and this really is an impressive demonstration of the private sector's ability to nimble, to react to and reposition to opportunities, and to really address the issue at hand. Is we're seeing partnerships form that are responding to this crisis. And so I want to highlight a really specific example and demonstrate how everybody on the call, how community leaders can really be there to support these partnerships that are responding to this issue. So demand is increasing for life-saving medical devices. We're seeing this with ventilators, with masks, with the supply chain supporting those, and other really critical needed supplies, medical devices, and other equipment. Repurpose manufacturing plants and the workforce that either has been furloughed or laid off, they're being repositioned to increase production volume to respond to these critical needs. So the example that I want to highlight here is one that has been very recent in the news. You may have heard of this. A company called Ventec. It's called Ventec Life Systems. They're out of Bothell, Washington, in Greater Seattle. They recently, as of March 27th, announced that they have formed a partnership with General Motors to scale their Voxen ventilator production at General Motors' Kokomo, Indiana plant. And so this partnership will enable 10,000 more ventilators to be produced per month, with the opportunity to scale that up even further if needed. So currently, Ventec has been producing several hundred a month. They're also increasing their production, but with this partnership, we're looking at at least 12,000 more ventilators being produced a month, life-saving equipment to help those who are battling this terrible disease. So in this situation, MZ's developer and job postings analytics can assess the labor market opportunities for Ventec, for General Motors in that partnership, and the Kokomo region as they try to help support this situation and this partnership. So starting with looking at Ventec and looking at their company and their labor market profile in the next slide, we can see that we can, similar to what Josh had demonstrated before, we can see what occupations have been posted specific to Ventec over the last few years. They do a last year scan to really see the type of positions that they typically post for. And so a lot of these are related to the engineering of their Voxen ventilator, system. And so you see a lot of the skills here: engineers, you see, respiratory therapists, you see, procurement positions. So you really are getting a good glimpse of what's important to that company. And this is really transferable to what you could see in other ventilator, manufacturers and other companies. But you can see that type of talent that Ventec will look for as they continue to re-engineer and also produce on their own as well. Then going to the next slide, we look at the skills that Ventec as a company, requires. Skills related to medical device manufacturing and design and ventilators and good manufacturing practices, and a lot electronics and manufacturing engineering. So these are the skills that this company has demanded over time for the company to be successful. So on the next slide, we really get a glimpse of the current hiring situation to ramp up the volume of the production of these Voxen ventilators. So GM is actively recruiting for the specific role of production worker for the production of Ventec's Voxen ventilators at the Kokomo, Indiana plant. Community leaders, they can understand the labor market profile of production workers in the Kokomo region to really do two main things, likely others, but support the Ventec GM's partnership hiring needs. Obviously, they're really trying to scale up right now, hiring needs, and the leaders, the regional leaders in Kokomo, can help transition those from other businesses who have been laid off, furloughed, to return to employment. So with this demonstration, you can really see how labor market information and community leaders can help support these opportunities to both produce life-saving equipment, but also help their economy. On the next page, we can see some of the data that we can see from the labor market information that MZ provides. So the Kokomo region, for the specific occupation production worker, the Kokomo region has an above average labor supply of talent for the specific one. So it's a 2.89 location quotient, which means that the Kokomo region has over 2 times the U.S. national average amount of talent in their region for this specific occupation. General Motors is paying a little over $34,600 a year. That's the annualized wage for this specific production worker position. It's a little less than the average, the regional median in the Kokomo region, but more than the national median for this role. On the next slide, using MZ's developer and labor market information, we can also, community leaders in Kokomo can also understand where talent currently works, where they're currently coming from, and this can really help as the broader region can help transition people who maybe are out of work or who have worked for different businesses that have laid off or furloughed, and really assess where that talent is coming from and how it can serve this particular partnership. And in the slide, you can see it's a little hard to see, but Kokomo is right in the center in that blue. Looking to also to the future a little bit, and I know we're talking about what's current now, but on the next slide, we can also see how production workers in the Kokomo region, either within this partnership or even beyond through either Ventec or through GM, we can see opportunities over time for these production workers to even have opportunities to upskill. And this is important as we're thinking as community leaders more broadly. So we have a skills transferability table, which demonstrates, and I just grabbed the top 3 in this example, the different occupations that have the highest compatibility to production workers. And as you see, some of those wages are higher than what that production worker wage looks like. On the next page, we also see how labor market and industry data can really help in a situation similar to this regarding supply chain. So understanding supply chain is very important with these partnerships and with these very urgent need to come together as a private sector and public sector to make sure that these partnerships take form, that life-saving equipment can quickly ramp up. So in this scenario, Ventec and GM, they have already identified their suppliers and have gone through the supply chain identification process. But for future opportunities that many of you may face in your communities, it's important to understand the supply chain if these opportunities were to arise for you. So using MZ's Business Engage, leaders can set a drive time requirement, and a lot of these manufacturing partnerships have specific drive time needs or supply chain needs. So for this one, I just sent a 2-hour radius, and you can see then how you can identify specific company suppliers and specific industries using NAICS codes. So this map kind of gives you a highlight, and then you can see the list of specific company names. So this can help community leaders if they're working with these particular manufacturing partnerships on saying, hey, this is how our community can support this partnership to ramp up production for your life-saving medical equipment. So on the next page, I summarize, what does this mean? What does this mean? How does industry and labor market information apply to this type of situation and this urgent need to ramp up production for ventilators, masks, all kinds of medical supplies, even things like food production, whatever it may be, to respond to this current situation. Community leaders can direct resources and labor to companies to produce these medical devices that will save lives. That's obviously the most urgent need, but also to connect and retrain the laid off or furloughed workers community, demonstrate the business community's capacity to accommodate similar partnerships. So even in this stressful time, there's even this opportunity for your communities to really understand how you can accommodate new business opportunities coming to your community and demonstrate how you can support that. And then anticipate changes in tax revenue. It's important to realize that the public sector, which many of you probably on this call are a part of and connect to, understand what the changes are looking like in the short term and long term, regarding tax revenue coming into your community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dustin. Yeah, great information there. And this hits home on really one of the things that we're seeing all over the country, and that is, our communities, economic development organizations, chambers, others, really serving as a matchmaker for their maybe existing production companies to pivot to help with the COVID-19 pandemic, or to bring to look through their supply chain, other things like that. So really good tactical ways to use data in that vein. So thank you. All right, so to transition, we're going to just talk briefly about how to assess the impact of COVID-19. There are multiple ways of doing this, but what we're going to do is just go through a quick example, and we'd love to hear your specific questions through this, through the chat feature here, where you can ask questions, or offline we'll give our contact information. MZ has done economic impact analysis for many, many years, and so knowing the ins and outs of this is important, and there are some nuances with economic impact analysis for sure. So really quickly, I want to highlight a blog post, an analysis that we did a week or so ago, called "How COVID-19 Will Cost U.S. Restaurant Billions." And this is just one chart, really fascinating report that looked at either short-term, just kind of minimal, kind of optimistic view of if restaurants lost 1 week of sales versus 3 months worth of sales. And you can run, MZ has an input-output model that allows you to look at the flow of economic activity and understand the ripple effects of when an industry loses sales, jobs, earnings, what that does to the rest of the economy. And you can see here that, so it's really just astounding numbers here for restaurants, and it's broken into the direct loss, the initial loss, and the indirect loss. So the indirect would be, the direct is this to the supply chain, and the indirect is to the suppliers, and we're going to get into that here in a second. So really understanding just the full effects across, throughout the supply chain is important. This, as we wrote this article, I was reminded of a really excellent Wall Street Journal piece that came out just a few days before, looking at really what they call the virus chain reaction for small businesses. And they highlighted a specific company called, or a specific restaurant outside of Atlanta in Cartersville, Georgia, called Table 20. And very popular restaurant that had been doing very well. And obviously, like most restaurants, have just been hit super hard. And this article, just have a snippet of the beginning here, highlights the ripple effect across the supply chain. Everything from the linen company that they ordered napkins from, to a hydroponic farmer who they ordered lettuce from, to tablecloth suppliers, liquor distributors. Just really a real world article on how, the impacts to a supply chain when there is this kind of devastation. So I highly recommend that article. But it got us thinking about, okay, well, what is happening in the restaurant industry right now? Obviously, most states have ordered total shutdowns. Most cities have ordered, a lot of cities have ordered emergency orders where restaurants can't have dine-in customers. So there are major ramifications here. I wanted to look at just one example here, playing off of that Wall Street Journal article. So if we look at, this is also highlights where really some baseline labor market statistics can be beneficial as well. Some key facts here about Atlanta. There's 108,000 jobs in full service or sit down restaurants in Atlanta. It's the second largest industry in the metro area behind elementary and secondary schools. Or 4,300 establishments, $7.1 billion in sales. We can just give some dynamics of the demographic base too. 57% of workers in full service restaurants in Atlanta are non-white, 65% are age 19 to 44, and 54% are female. So you can see the demographic that gets hit as the workers get laid off in this industry. In terms of the supply chain, this is just a quick look at industry purchases for full service restaurants in Atlanta. And you can start to see here the other industries that get hit because of the slowdown in the restaurants. We mentioned there's a few from the Wall Street Journal article, but this is just high level. These are 3-digit industries, 3-digit NAICS codes. You could get down to the specific 6-digit. A bunch of different type of real estate leasers of real estate, who these real estate owners who are leasing, renting their properties to restaurants. There's going to be a ripple effect there. Managements of companies, enterprises, all kinds of different food manufacturing, the suppliers to the restaurants, whether that's a hydroponic farmer or others. There are professional services like accountants and others that are getting hit, will get hit, utility companies, and then beverage and tobacco product manufacturing in terms of specifically around liquor, beer, wine sales, all that kind of thing. So this is where you can go right in if you have access to our tools to be able to look at what is the supply chain for a specific industry or a region, to look at those industry to industry purchases. What does one industry purchase from another, and how much of that is satisfied in the region versus satisfied outside the region? This is important information as you talk through the impacts of when we go through, okay, if this business is closing, what does this actually mean for the entire regional economy and not just that one industry? When we do that, then we can say, okay, well, what about running a scenario, impact scenario? If we lost, if there's 100 restaurant jobs being lost in Atlanta, and unfortunately, it's probably a lot more that will be lost and have been lost already. What does that mean? It means there's actually 100 jobs directly in restaurants mean 48 jobs elsewhere that will be lost as well. meaning $5 million a change in earnings, a loss in earnings, and that change in taxes on production imports as well. So the tax base gets hit as well, a key service sector industry here for Atlanta. And this isn't actually, these aren't, restaurants, a lot of this what's being hit are not primary industries, not economic base industries that are exporting, and those multipliers and impacts are even higher, and there will be a ripple effect through primary industries as well. One other thing I'll highlight here is when you do these economic impact scenarios, you can break out, okay, what are the effects by industry for other industries, for other occupations, but we also, with our social accounting matrix, our model, we can look at demographic breakdowns as well. So, for females 25 to 34, we expect 16 job losses because of those 100 across the Atlanta metro because of those 100 jobs lost in Atlanta. So this is just one quick example to say, okay, well, how do we assess the impact of COVID-19? You could combine all the different industries and run multiple scenarios or do one large scenario. You could also do specific ones around one industry like restaurants. You can do, you can look at, okay, well, we know the sales numbers are going down. We'll put it as input sales and not jobs, that type of thing as well. I will say as a note, our input-output model is geared toward long-term impacts, and it really doesn't have a time scale. So one thing that we are doing is going to be adding an update to our input-output model here, hopefully in the next week or two, to be able to do different types of multipliers. We'll have a full explanation of this when we do this update, so that you can look at, pick a different type of multiplier that will run a different, that will give you different impacts based off of short-term versus long-term effects and regional versus national effects. So we're excited about that update. We know there's going to be a lot of economic impact work happening, and we want to support that. And if you have custom economic impact questions, we have economists and consultants who do that kind of work all the time as well. Before we wrap up, we wanted to talk about some of the other data points to consider. And again, this is not comprehensive, but some of these things certainly popped at our mind. Self-employment by industry, occupation, just the composition of your self-employed workforce. There's a lot of talk about unemployment insurance, claimants, and the CARES Act, again, allowing for self-employed workers to be part of that. But it's still good to see, I highly recommend, what is the share of self-employed in your workforce? What are those types of workers by industry and by occupation? Just getting a sense for that can help you isolate and be more focused in your services to understanding the kind of programs and policy that you recommend. MZ has an automation index as well, and we really believe and see the possibility that there's going to be more automation in the future here. So check out MZ's automation index. We can share some data with you around that to see what is that risk of automation by occupation in your region as well. Looking at, we've gotten quite a few questions about essential versus non-essential workforce. C2ER has some good resources around this, the Council for Economic and Community Research. They have done some good stuff there. We've seen a number of good analyses from our clients around essential versus non-essential. Some states have done it, commissioned this, or just done it themselves. So if you have questions about that, we're certainly happy to go through that with you all. And demographics, population, workforce demographics, a bunch of other community indicators. It's a really good time. What we've seen a lot of folks doing is just baseline stats right now, so you can see what's happening. What is your world? What does your region look like as COVID really the impacts really start to unfold. Before we get to the Q&A, we have a few more minutes here. We wanted to talk about how to, what to think about when prepping for post-COVID. As I've hinted at before here, we believe, future work principles are going to be accelerated. This is the time for regions who have emphasized an agile workforce, who have thought through this. They're going to be farther ahead than other regions. This is an example of automation report that our UK team has done and applied here in the US. And it allows you, this is based off of ONET. The automation index looks at ONET knowledge, skills, and abilities, but you can start to see here, what is the exposure in occupations in terms of automation, and which one should you be concerned about? We also see this as a really great, again, as going from a great pause to the great pivot time to emphasize reskilling and upskilling. We're hearing a lot of questions about this. We've been already helping some regions work through different upskilling initiatives and understand what are the resilient skills in your community. Also, do you have a real actionable picture of supply and demand, and being able to look at that more in real time? It's a big question that we get a lot, and we've been doing some work around with our new geography of skills report and skills cluster methodology and others to really help regions out with that. We also see this as an opportunity for small and medium metros to attract more remote workers. This is already a trend that we were starting to see, but given that population dense areas, there might be some folks who just kind of flee out of more urban population dense areas. And again, that's really speculation, but it's certainly a possibility that communities at least can use that as a continued draw. And this really emphasizes the importance of having good broadband, good technology, co-working spaces, others if you are a small and medium-sized community. And bigger picture, just question to you all: how are you positioning your organization, yourselves as community leaders? This is the time again for all of you to shine, and we are seeing that across the board. We also know that there are organizations that might focus more just on business recruitment, who in our talks with them are understanding they're having to pivot or add focus to their organizations as well, because true business recruitment might slow down for a little bit. And so, or certainly probably is slowing down. So how do those organizations help with business services, business retention, business expansion, that type of thing? How do workforce boards go to more virtual services? Those are the types of questions that we're hearing a lot and helping our clients through. Additional resources, again, can be found at our COVID-19 resource page. We have you can see the dashboard there. We've got some cool articles. We're going to be doing much more research. We have a webinar next week on our free resume optimizer that we're going to be releasing as well. That webinar is on April 7th. Look for more details on that as well. I mentioned this earlier, before we go to the Q&A. We're really excited to bring these community roundtables, these virtual Zoom roundtables on board last week. We did 3 of them, one for states, one for metro city areas, and one for rural areas, and had great dialogue, really talked through best practices and solutions, let everyone kind of brainstorm together. If you're interested in that, here's a website. Email me as well, and you can reach out, and we will make sure that you're a part of those if you want to be. So with that, Dustin, let's get to some questions, shall we?
Absolutely.
All right, so we've gotten, Dustin, I don't know if you can see all these, but we've gotten a huge amount of questions. So in the time remaining, we'll try to get through as many as possible. One question here is, in fall 2020, will higher ed see more of an increase in students or a decrease? And that's a great question. Our higher education team just had a webinar right before us to talk through some changes in enrollment and different ways community colleges specifically are serving their students right now. Dustin, do you have any thoughts on what we'll see from enrollment and patterns going through this?
Yeah, it's really some of the information that is coming out is that it may really impact how decisions are made by students who are about to graduate on, what maybe they would have done traditionally versus what they're looking at now. There's going to be a big rise in, online learning. So I think it'll also be dependent upon what the summer looks like and how quickly things may or may not be able to get back to normal. But I do think that online learning is going to really, become much more popular in the short term.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As we answer these questions, we have our contact information here. Feel free to email us. I'm going to pull up one of the questions we got were some of these websites. So if you weren't able to jot them down, here again is our COVID-19 resource page website. And in just a minute, I'll switch to the community roundtable so you can get that URL as well. That was one of the questions we got. We will be sending out the slides and a recording. Let's also got some questions there. A couple other questions we've gotten. will MZ be providing month-to-month data for some of the key indicators, jobs by industry, sales revenues, so that COVID impacts can be better monitored? That's a great question. Our data team is actively looking right now what more real-time data we can be bringing, or month-over-month data we can be bringing to the surface. We are talking about some more monthly employment figures but no promises there yet, because we want to make sure that we can do that in the right way and in a trustworthy way. There are different sales and revenue numbers are probably going to be trickier to get month over month, but there are some other unemployment figures and things like that that we are actively looking at right now. If you have ideas, if you have requests, please reach out to us. Another question we got is, for job postings, is there a way to look at daily totals or weekly totals for past days throughout the previous month? For example, if we wanted to track the trends and changes on a weekly basis in March, is that possible? And yes, it is possible. We're trying to provide as much granularity and breakdown from a time perspective as possible, so you can go week over, you can break it down by week, previous day, previous week, and previous 30 days. We are right now, the time frame on the left is month over month, and then we're providing some insights, more daily insights. We'll be doing more updates as we go through that, and we'd love to hear your feedback on what would be most useful for you as well. We're getting a number of questions about the regional, like how far, kind of regional granularity we can get with this data. For the automation index, for others, usually we're safe. We provide most of our data at the county level. MSA level is really good. MSAs are great proxies for just a region, more of a labor shed. So highly recommended that. We do provide data down to the zip code level, and some city level information for job postings, and our resumes and profiles. So you can start to you can approximate, specific parts of counties and things like that as well. And so that was one of those questions we got is around that, and specifically around the automation index. I think you'd be really safe going down to the county level. And really the automation index is by occupation. So it's really just depending on the data you're going to get by the geographic layer that you use there. Let's see here. We're getting so many other questions here. I'm just making sure I can cover as many kind of broad-based. We've got a number of questions from folks who are attending from Canada. Thank you for attending this webinar. We do not have every single data point in Canada that we have in the US. So keep that in mind. We do have a full Canadian support team, and I'm happy to go through that and hear what would be most beneficial for you all as well. We do have some good data for Canada though as well, specifically around input output, economic impacts, and all this employment data and job postings as well. Let's see here. One question about the job posting data available below the state level. So just to clarify, the public job posting dashboard we released is just at the state level. It's a free resource. I want everyone to share. If you want to go below the state level, talk to us, or if you have a login or subscription to our tools, or you can get down more granularly to city, county, MSA. And I just heard from my team who's listening in that we actually just released a job posting dashboard for Canada as well. So that's awesome news. I was not aware of that. So for all those who are listening in Canada, we'll have more about that as well. Let's see here. There are lots of questions coming in here. So the one question we get is, and this is a really interesting, a good one here. In this time of imminent economic data requests and quick turnaround from our stakeholders, are there any COVID-19 related data misunderstandings or misinterpretations which would you like to caution against? And that's a really phenomenal question, and something that I meant to get through when I was talking through some of those other data to consider. And Dustin, please chime in as well. One of the cautions I would say is that there is no perfect data set. And so to really understand, we always recommend and do this through our training as well, to understand the strengths and weaknesses of every individual data point and data set out there and where the source data comes from. So when we talk about real-time data, really that's just a term that's used for either few previous days, maybe previous week data, or sometimes monthly data as well. So understand, like, again, how frequent is it? How are those updates happening? How granular are those updates? And then the lag issue can certainly be something that we would caution you all with. There's also the general principle is the more up to date the data release is, whether it's a weekly UI claims data or the JOLTS data, means that the granularity, the comprehensiveness of that suffers, because you either takes a lot more time to provide very comprehensive, detailed data across all industries and across all regions. So that's something to consider as well. We've gotten quite a few questions around our industry and occupation projections through this as well. We have, obviously, given uncertainty and given big events like this, and we saw this when Hurricane Katrina hit in Louisiana, saw this during the Great Recession, that projections, which are based on historical and those past trends, obviously it takes a while for the projections to get caught up. Once we have to rely on that source data to come in, and then the projections will start reflecting what's happening now. So we would definitely caution against just throwing out a 5 or 10 year projection right now based off of data that was pre-COVID. Hopefully that helps answer that question. Anything else, Dustin, there?
Yeah, I mean, and I agree with all that, but a couple of things to think about, as of course it's obvious that things are changing by the minute in this horrible situation with COVID-19 coronavirus. But what some of the core fundamental infrastructures of regional economy and the data that's available immediately is still there. Understanding what is that portfolio of businesses in the community, and what does that industry look like and those clusters look like. That information is there, and what does at least and we know that there's been very sudden dramatic impacts in the labor market, but still there's a still strong ability to understand what does that workforce look like in that community, even if right now they're laid off. So that data is still there to really help as our community leaders on the phone and beyond are thinking about how they're responding to their economies and using this data to help their economy now, how to help businesses stay in business and start to think about the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, well said there. Let's try to get to a couple more questions here. Got another good question on job postings. With respect to job postings data, can you share the process you are using to ensure the job posting is still current, especially in the current state of the economy? How can we be sure that companies are deactivating job postings appropriately? And this goes, that's a great question that I don't think I can fully answer from a technical perspective. And I know we have a job postings team that does look through all of that and does careful of a job as we process the data as possible. I would also say that some of this is where job postings is not, again, in terms of imperfect data, there's no perfect data sets. Job postings, we do the best job in deduplicating, normalizing, streamlining that data as possible. But there are, there are no guarantees about, if a company takes a posting down, does that mean they've hired, or they're just not hiring? Does that, how they deactivate, all that kind of stuff. But we will follow up with a specific technical answer on that one. So very good question. Let's see here. Will COVID-19 spur growth in companies encouraging / promoting remote working? How can this be tracked? And great question, Dustin. I'll let you jump into here. I would say one way to track that is to see is there in the job posting analytics, is there an uptick in remote postings? And one way to look at, and obviously one caveat there is that there's going to be a decrease in postings across the board. So even if there's a decrease in remote postings, we would encourage looking at just the relative proportion there, pre-COVID and post-COVID. You can also look at, again, American Community Survey has some data around, like, is your primary work from home or not? And we have some of that data in our tools, and you can get some of the access there. But we do believe companies, I don't know whether companies encourage and actively promote remote working. It is definitely opening up in this new world that, all of this infusion of technology in the workplace and people getting more comfortable working from home. We think, that is going to have some ripple effects at least as I see it. Anything to add there, Dustin?
Yeah, I would agree. And, I think it's a combination of that information, of tracking job postings analytics, profile analytics as well, but then also thinking about, what business functions, cannot be done from home. And that's a good way to kind of compare and contrast, what the changing economic conditions might be in the actual place of doing business. But then also, I think it's also an opportunity to complement, the data that we provide and with other data that's out there as well, that might be seen in commercial real estate data, even data from utilities, data from, internet providers. So I think that there's great ways to complement, various different data sets and sources, to really have that holistic picture of what's going on in this changing environment.
Absolutely. With all that said, we've got a number of questions. We're not going to be able to hit all of them, but I think a strain across a few of the questions I'm looking at is how can we, in the questioner's mind, how can we run this data for our regions, for our areas? So if you saw, reach out to us. We have our emails here. Reach out to your account manager if you work with us here at MZ. I mean, we want to help provide resource, to pull reports for you to help you understand this and to be a resource. So we're here, and even if you don't have access and you need some data to be able to help with with your decision, again, with decision makers, partners, working with your community, let us know, and we certainly could be there. We will be there for you. Again, this is our email addresses. We thank you so much for your time. Please stay healthy, stay safe, and we're signing off here from MZ. And please get in touch if we can do anything for you. Thank you much.
Thank you.